Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
So I always start, even though I have your bio, I always ask the hardest questions right off the bat. Who is Gresh? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, and that's always a hard answer. You know, I'm just overall, I always say I'm a busybody. So some people use the word entrepreneur. Sometimes people use creative or creator or something along those lines. But I'm really big into just trying, to find things, test out things, and never kind of staying in one path sometimes. Sometimes I like to experiment with a lot of things, but I'm basically from, the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up for the most part, as much as I can remember, in Woodbridge, Virginia. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia now. I went to school in D.C., so I went to Howard for my undergrad, Georgetown for my master's. And ever since then, I've been hopefully trying to create things. I've done it unconsciously and sometimes knowingly of what I wanted to create. And I just started to build, certain things to hopefully help out entrepreneurs and business owners and hopefully scratch that creative gene as well, too.
Definitely. And I know with what you do, as you said, you're digital marketing, but you also host a podcast, and you not only host one, but you host a lot of them because you push out a lot of episodes and you talk to CEOs, and I'm grateful. Thank you for having me on. And it's funny because it's like, oh man, I always want to chitty chat, talk about everything. And with your podcast, because it's business to business, CEOs, get it done, don't have a lot of time. You are just cutting straight through that knowledge. And so since doing that, how many CEOs would you say you've talked to since all this?
If we talk about the podcast, I have probably about 900 or so episodes. I want to say I had a longer form podcast, but it's so funny that you said that because I think a lot of times when you create stuff, you always want to create it for who you're talking to. I think so many times we skip over that part. And I had a longer form podcast. But my goal with this newer podcast was really to make it more laser focused, more bang, bang, bang. You get your information. If you want to dive in more, you have that opportunity to do that because you can get a hold of the person. But if we rewind back, because I've had a blog for probably about 8 or 9 years, who knows how many people I've talked to in some form, shape, or fashion. Thousands and thousands of CEOs and, email interviews and something like that. But I do miss and love what you're doing because I miss that opportunity to just kind of have a conversation, not feel like you have to go somewhere, you have to do this or you have to do that, but just kind of have that deep conversation and that connection. So I love everything you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's, I appreciate you saying that because I also, at the same time, it's like, I appreciate what you're doing. It's like a big love fest. But
yes.
It sounds like cliche, but it takes all kinds, it's like when if we all sat around listening and peeling back the layers, like I'm talking about, might not get stuff done because you're sitting processing for too long. So you need a mix of it all. So.
Yeah, but the grass is always greener, they say. But I think one of the things, especially during this past year, we're reminded of how important it is to pause to really look at what's important. So that's why I love how your podcast spoke to that. And I think I can't remember if everything had happened, when we had actually recorded the interview, but it spoke directly to that of just pausing, not being in a rush to go all these places. And if you didn't know that, then the world kind of forced us into that.
Seriously, I can't believe that's so funny how you're right. I forgot that you and I talked right when this was all, and it was even should we still record?
Right.
And I was still doing mine in studio, so it felt really weird. And I was just on a Zoom earlier today, a meeting, and had never met we were in a breakout room, never met them. And I said, I remember when I first started doing stuff over Zoom, it felt so weird. And, and then now so many people are, used to it. So it's definitely the silver lining that we can connect, digitally. So.
Yeah, I always try to say it's different. It's still a way to connect. I still miss kind of the face-to-face and connection piece. But I think it's just a different way, and I don't think it's kind of going anywhere. So it's, I guess, important for us to kind of, evolve the way that we connect as well too. So
definitely. So you have, you've taught over 900 episodes. So you have a ton of, CEOs that you've talked to and business people. And I know one thing you and I were talking about earlier before we recorded was, kind of the grit it takes to run a business. And I know you mentioned you have a family business. They were in the newspaper business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear kind of how did that experience of seeing them with their business influence you with what you're doing today, or kind of the lessons, the biggest kind of lessons over, that you've had over that time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my family didn't have a business. I started a family newspaper as a business when I was like 10.
Oh my God.
So yeah, then when I said I was a busybody, that's what I meant. I was the person that's selling things on the playground and doing all those things that kids do for whatever reason. Which is why I kind of felt like, when I started to like interview people, talk with entrepreneurs and business owners, I felt at home. But it was really that creative thing that I did when I was younger. And I didn't know a lot of other people that did things like that, even, years later, that kind of led me to kind of what I'm doing now and created that foundation. But it was kind of at the heart of just wanting to, my dad went TDY. So I'm a military brat. So he went nice. And he went to an entirely different country for about a year. And I was 10.
When they deploy somewhere, like go somewhere or something, just for non-military background people.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Exactly. And you should, and definitely, a lot of people may not know that. I just learned that not too long ago, exactly what the term was. But he went there for a year, and this was definitely pre, quarantine, pre-Skype, pre-FaceTime, pre-Zoom, all these things. So basically, me and my mom, we would get like a care package. We would put his favorites like honey buns and oatmeal cream pies and all those things and send it to him every month. And to kind of keep him in the loop about everything that was going on with the family, I created this family newspaper, and I got my mom to print it out. But it was just kind of getting a recap of everything that was going on in the family. And it was kind of my way to like keep my dad in the loop. But also I sold the subscriptions to like my family, friends and my family too. Yes. So that was something that I kind of went back to when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be and do when I grew up.
Oh my gosh. I was impressed, number one, that I thought, oh my gosh, what a heart you have to want to have your dad stay connected, so thoughtful. And what is even more impressive is that stuff is all still true.
Yes.
But you are smart. Like, okay, I got to make this happen, because all of us that do these kind of passion projects, as you said, it's like, it's mixing it with business and, stuff that fulfills our heart. And so I'm like, oh, I'm getting inspiration from your childhood story, because I feel like this is like my family newspaper. Like I want everyone to be connected and to feel part of it. But then at the end of the day, it's like, but to get this stuff going, it costs stuff to put stuff out there. And so you have to, it's that balance of thinking of things like a business. So smart little Gresh. Good job.
Yes. I'll try to give myself a pat on the back for sure. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to that. I think people have so many phenomenal things that they're creating, but I hate to use the word monetize because that makes it seem kind of dirty, but you want to make sure that you can support the things that you're doing. And I think the people that are really able to kind of make a true impact in the world are able to quote unquote monetize it or support it or get it going, because you have to be able to do those things to kind of, hire more people, help out more families, bring people more on. And I think when we change our perspective, it helps out with it.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned grit, like needing grit and how hard it is to run a business. And I feel like especially, and I don't know how it is with when you talk to your CEOs, and I feel like acknowledging there's probably a difference too between some men and women and how we approach things. Stereotypical, it's not true for all. Mm-hmm. But on my podcast, I talk a lot about peeling back the layers, shame, things like that. And it's like the stuff that no one talks about. And I feel like, especially in the business world, something that's come up a lot is kind of the whole hustle, like hustle, get it done, wake up every day, rise and grind, go. But then so many people are left feeling empty and less than and failures. And I don't know if imposter syndrome is as common in men as it is in women, but with everything you've learned, what have you found to be true with kind of balancing that hustle, but then, I don't know, I guess genuinely being fulfilled in your job, because it is so draining as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and it's funny. I think I read this quote, and I can't remember if like Steve Jobs said it or somebody, but it was some really popular founder, and he said, you don't have to love what you do or what you start, but because it's so hard, you probably want to love it because it will take a lot out of you. And I think that I want to check all the above to everything you said about imposter syndrome, feeling you're not good enough, feeling like you maybe made the wrong decision. So you have all those feelings that kind of you go through. So I think especially like during the podcast, we always, try to talk about what are the things that you do to be successful or you do to be successful and all those hacks and nuggets and things like that. But I think I always say, and one of the common things that I'll talk about, during the show and why I try to start out with the story too, is we forget about that human aspect of business. We forget about the people that are behind the business. We forget about the families that are affected, by somebody wanting to start a business or, what that does. And I think that's what I wanted to hopefully, bring to light, for the people during the podcast. But I think there's definitely a place, for, working really hard. I think that goes a real long way. But I think the thing that we all should do, whether you are a CEO or an entrepreneur, a business owner, or you work for an organization or your mom or father or whatever, is try to be in alignment. I think so many times in life, we do things because we should do them rather than do them because they speak directly to us. So even before starting all that, figuring out why you want to start a business or whatever, start anything, I would say that's probably the biggest thing to do, because what I hope to do, during the show and why I've, spoken to so many different people that have different size businesses, different stages. Some are running it remotely. Some people have like a balloon company. Some people have 50 employees. Some people have 50,000 employees. I think it's always different on how you can build the business. And I think if we understand that, we get to ask, like, what do you see your life as? What do you hope to accomplish? And then you work backwards and build a business according to that. And I think if you couple in that passion, while you will quote unquote work hard, it won't really be work. And you feel like you're going in alignment with, I think, on a deeper level, why we were all put here. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that, yes, it is grit, it is hustle, but there's never, great time. It's never always 100%, great times, but I think it's the ups and downs that make it kind of a beautiful process. And at the same time, if you're in alignment, then even the bad times, you feel like it's helping you to get to where you want to be to fulfill that purpose. So I hope that kind of answers, what it is.
What you said, because you asked if that makes sense, that definitely makes sense. And I always joke, on the podcast a lot on the first season, I would say, ooh, say that again. When you were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to say, ooh, say that again about the alignment in with your work. And I think that's huge, because personally, and I think I've written about this on Instagram, like, I'm trying to let go of the shoulds, like, we should do this, we should do that. And I know, like you said, no matter where someone's at, if it's their CEO or personal or just their normal life, I feel like it's that whole shoulds just creep in and out of everywhere. And for me, like with this podcast, this was like a passion project kind of business. And I'm constantly, it's constantly evolving. I'm constantly evolving, but I'm going in between those should do this, should do that, where it's like, well, this is something unique to me. There's not necessarily a clear path to follow. And it's so true. I feel like when I was listening to you, like, that's like every business. Yes, there's these models and these formulas you can follow, but at the end of the day, you are a unique person, and, you have to keep asking yourself, is this with alignment? Or else you spend your whole life building something and hustling and grinding when is it even something you want?
Yeah, and that really, hits home, for me. And I have this, I use this quote all the time. I'll say it during the podcast is, if you run your own race, you can never lose. And I think so many times we run other people's races, we do things that we should do. And that leads us down a path where we ultimately feel unfulfilled. We feel unhappy in so many things. And I think for me, especially when I was graduating, I graduated during the economic crisis. So it was a time where everything was just, I won't say the same as now, but it was kind of topsy-turvy and everything was turbulent. You didn't know what was what you were supposed to do was completely gone. So it was one of those times, like, I read a lot and I tried to do a lot of introspective work, because At the end of the day, I feel like you're kind of looking at the mirror and you have those regrets. And if those regrets happen, it's because you didn't do what you wanted to do, or you didn't even take the time to figure that out. You did what you should do. You did what was the right thing to do, and all those things. And I think we have to kind of do that work first before we do any type of, and it always changes too. So it's not something like you do it once and then it's over either.
That's like the lesson that keeps coming back to me. Like I always thought it's just one and done, right? Like you just learn the lesson and you just move on. Like, and so for me with like parenting, I always joke too. It's like, just you read the book, you figure out how to potty train. Like this is a horrible example, like for, well, hey, CEOs have kids too, but
yes, they do.
Exactly. And there's lots of, men and women out there, but I'm just thinking like with potty training, you have one and you think, oh, I figured it out. And then it moves on to someone else and it's like totally different. And you just thought like, no, I figured out how to do it and I moved on. And it's a very juvenile example, but,
yeah, but I think it connects with everybody, so.
And then you keep, these lessons keep coming around. So for you, you work with a ton of businesses, you talk to business owners, but what do you want? Like, what is an alignment for you? Like, what's your personal, what's your personal thing? How do you want things to end up?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. And that's something that I always, try to do that exercise on a regular basis, because I think just like you said, I think it evolves and it changes and it grows, over time. But one of the reasons I talked about, the story, that I had of my dad is because I felt like that kind of spoke to me before I even knew of, having success or any of these things. I was just being a kid. And I think when I try to figure out what I should do or what I shouldn't do, I always go back to stories like that. So for me, I've always been a creative person. I always like to write. I love to interview people and talk with people. So I think it might manifest itself in different ways. I know this is really big on most people to create content, create podcasts and things like that. But I always feel like I'm going to be doing something in alignment with that and really getting the opportunity to kind of hear people's stories, hear what they do, and then help people to kind of, be successful. So it might end up being more podcasts. It might end up being blog posts or VR or whatever it ends up being, in 20 years down the line. But at the heart of it, I love, talking to people, hearing their stories, and hopefully capture those stories so that other people can kind of learn those lessons and hopefully have an impactful and purposeful lives themselves.
That's great. I think that's why you and I, it's like, we're, what is it? Like two sides of the same coin. I don't know.
Yes.
Something like that, it's that story. It's that connection. And I love how you brought it back to that childhood story of you starting that paper, because I do the same thing. I look at so much of my life and it's almost like mining my past for clues for my future.
I love that. Say that again.
Mining my past to find clues for my future.
I love that.
Dang, I just said
He's saying what
it's a mic drop moment.
What's that?
Oh my, I know. I told him I had him say that earlier. But it's so true because, if you talk about, because of this, it's a lot of like healing and growth too, not just business stuff, but you clued into that. You said, to run these businesses, to run in alignment, you have to do that work, that internal work. And so when we first started talking, I was thinking like, oh, this is like business, which I love too. I love all the things. That's why I talk about Oprah a lot, because I love how she just had, her show had all the things and just, you got something from it. And so I was thinking more business world, but it totally always comes full circle that like, you can't run a business, you can't hustle and grind and build a dream or build a business if it's not connected to some way into your passion or your mission. And even like you said, if it doesn't have to be directly related to it, but it has to be in alignment.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I tried to do and find different ways in order to for that to happen as well, too. And I think if you're continually mining, you're continually thinking about it, you'll come up with creative ways by which you can do it. I found myself, so like we do digital marketing services, but one of the things that I found, because I have like that tech background and people want to know about that, I found myself on a lot of boards, but my time was being, squished. So I wasn't able to kind of do as much as I would have hoped. So I started to reach out, basically ask these organizations. I wanted to step off the board, but I wanted to donate services because I know what they needed and wanted. And I still felt very strongly about, the organization. So it's just like some of those things that didn't happen to, for me on day one, but it's like, I can figure out organizations or things that I'm passionate about. And maybe if they aren't able to work with us, full time, or we're able to do it to some prorated service or something like that, I can still help support them to do the things that I want to do and hopefully create those win-win scenarios. So I think if we mine I'm going to say it wrong, but mine our future or mine our past in order to find our future, it comes up with those creative ways that we can make that happen.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's so funny. It's like when we're kids and we're dreaming and we're coming up with ideas, we're not, now as an adult, you start thinking of things I can do or want to do. And immediately those internal judges are like, nope, can't do that because XYZ, can't do that because XYZ. I mean, all the reasons. If you right now said, oh, I'm going to start a paper, today would be a blog, like I'm going to do one just for my family. It's like, well, no, we don't need to do that. Everyone has phones. There would be all these things. But if a kid just said, I want to do this, what a sweet little thing they could be creating for their family. It's like all this stuff that just the world sometimes, not only the world, we get in our own ways, but as kids, it's just a lot of that stripped away. So
yeah. And I think it's so important to be able to kind of tap, more into that, because even as kids, or even as parents, we can sometimes, say that to our kids and not realizing, and I experienced that, especially like when I first started my business, is just trying to make sure that people care for you and they love you, but at the same time, they're sometimes projecting their world onto yours. And when you have, the open eyes and the carefreeness of, being a child, sometimes that's allowing things that we never would have saw or thought would have been created to be created. So I think it's important for us to kind of tap into that, to recognize that, and just continue to do that exercise, so to speak.
That's great. All right. So as we close it out, you have gotten tons and tons of nuggets. So there's no pressure on you whatsoever for a closing nugget of wisdom. But what is one piece of advice, whether personal or professional, that you like to pass on, being someone who is hustling, but has their, is living their life in alignment?
Yes.
What's your parting thing that you want to give people?
Can I give you two, a quick one and then a longer one?
Of course you can.
Okay.
No rules here.
Yes, great. So I think we were talking about before, I think having that marathon mindset is so important. I think so many times in life, we think that whenever I launch it or start it, needs to be exactly how it's going to be 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line. So I would say appreciate the progress, appreciate the process, and just continue to kind of take action towards that. I think so many times we want it to be done and perfect on day one, but that doesn't always happen. And probably closely
my diary.
Maybe your diary might be mine. So there we go.
We're all together in this.
Yeah. And probably closely after that, I always have a quote I always go back to, and I tell myself this all the time is, don't tell me the sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon. And just as I kind of touched on it before, there's so many things that we're using now, that we see now, that were never thought possible. And Will Smith has this video where he says there was once a time where if you would bend a piece of metal and you would fly it from Washington, D.C. to California, that never would have been thought possible, but it's being done on a regular basis. So I think so many times we have to really tap into that childlike appreciation of the world, appreciation of possibilities, and really do that. And people may say that it's not possible, but they often will say it until it's done. So sometimes it's on us, that dream, that hope, whatever you have, to really roll up your sleeves, especially if it's in alignment, and do kind of like the work to see that come to fruition. So that's probably the thing I would say more than anything else. And I tell myself that as much as possible.
That is amazing. It goes back to that childlike faith, that childlike belief. And I think that's a lesson I know personally. It keeps coming back to that, just to, like you said, it's only impossible until it's not. It hasn't been done, and that doesn't mean it's impossible. So absolutely. That's great. Well, Gresham, when people want to find you, yes, where can they find you?
Yes. So I have a kind of a landing page of everything that I'm working on. It's at iamgresh.com. That's IAMGRESH.com. You can find links to the podcast, I Am CEO podcast, Blue 16 Media, CBNation.co, and all the things I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, I think we did a great job of blending my chitty chat conversation and your get the job done visions. I think we did a great job crossover today of getting to some really good nuggets, having a little fun conversation, but also just getting to the point. So I thank you for that.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. And that's when really phenomenal things happen, when you take two different things and you bring them together. So that's what we just did. Awesome work.
Yay.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes. For all things Flushing, visit our website at flushingitout.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.